It's amazing to know that 70% of the properties that come to market don't go back to the person that was purchased from. Now, that's because as an industry, I believe we do a very poor job of customer service, especially once we've sold. I've got this thing about self-limiting belief where often until people have seen that it can be done, they can't do it. Recruitment's a dirty word, you know what I mean? Like, never try to recruit someone, build a relationship with them, and the rest will pan out. I am where I deserve to be at any point in my life, whether that's in my career, my personal life, my fitness, whatever it is. I'm getting out what I'm putting in. If I'm not happy with what I see when I look in the mirror, I know I haven't worked hard enough, and that's on me.
Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
For those of you that don't know, you've had quite a journey with Ray White, starting on the corporate side where you managed operations throughout New South Wales before making the bold move to step back into business ownership with Ray White Shaw Group on the Gold Coast. To me, you're known for your innovative approach to recruitment, famously bringing in some of the really top performers in Ray White, like Vivian and Josh Teslin, and basically people that, others wouldn't think of approaching. I'm particularly fascinated by your community-focused business philosophy and that dedicated after-sales care role that you've created at Shaw Group, something I haven't seen many agents do. And I think, what makes your perspective so valuable is that you've seen hundreds of real estate businesses from the inside during your corporate days, which is what gives you this unique lens on what works and what doesn't. So I'm really excited to dig into lots of things with you today, but how you're applying the lessons from the Sydney market to break through, performance ceilings here on the Gold Coast. And I mean, look, let's go back to the beginning like I've known you for what feels like a million years. I think in the real estate industry now, it's sort of like dog years apply. Like, if you've been
Yeah.
around for 10, it's like 70. I remember meeting you back in a little restaurant in Neutral Bay during your Harcourts days. So for the people out there that don't know you, can you give us a bit of a background into your journey through real estate?
That was a million years ago. That was nearly 15, 16 years ago, Sam. So it was a long time ago. But I got into real estate really young. I was 17 years old when I kicked off my sales career in South Auckland. So at that time, I believe I was the youngest real estate agent in the country. It wasn't a young person's game back then. And that was a while ago. I'm 41 next week. So it was a long time ago. But started as a salesperson. First 6 months of my career really struggled. Then the next 6 months, I wrote 200 grand, and you got to remember houses were about 100 grand then, so that was pretty high volume. From there, I grew to sort of maintaining top 5 in the country for Ray White within New Zealand. Spent a little bit of time in corporate, getting some really good lessons from Kerry Smith, who was the CEO there. Then went to work with Megan Jaffe at her Parnell branch. I ran that. And then one day I woke up and I was in the GFC. So that was a whole different sort of ball game. And then moved to Sydney sort of 15, 16 years ago when I met you. So my whole career in Australia has been on the corporate side. So there was that time at Harcourts, went on to LJ Hooker for 4 years, loved my time there before coming home to Ray White, and then CEO and or director of New South Wales in some way, shape or form for about 8 years until stepping down from that 2 years ago, and here we are today.
And here we are. So what prompted the decision to leave the corporate side and get back into business ownership here on the beautiful Gold Coast? It's quite a shift from doing what you were doing with New South Wales operations.
That New South Wales business is such a monster. It's it's about a $30 billion business today, and that's just New South Wales ACT. When I took that role, I had huge imposter syndrome. Didn't think I deserved it. I was like 30 years old. I felt it was a huge job, and it was. So I had to get in there and really make it my own. And I didn't know how to put my own stamp on it, but learned very quickly. And it was through the partnership plans that I implemented and, really changed the whole culture and way that business ran. So I put a lot of work in. I was working 10, 12, 14-hour days every day for year after year after year, and I think I hit that 8-year mark and I was just so tired and burnt out. I needed a break. I needed to step down. I felt like I had given everything that I possibly could to that role. It was time to hand it over to someone else. Basically, our market share had gone up something like 3%, which sounds small, but it's huge on a business like that. I'd made a lot of changes. I'd recruited a lot of people. We had this whole Ray White was I walked away from that role knowing that I had handed it back a lot better than the way I had taken it. So I was very comfortable, but I needed a break, Sam. I needed a break. So stepped down, sold up in Sydney, and moved to the Gold Coast. Bought a house on the water, and that was a great move, I think, for me and for the business.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I know why I moved to the Gold Coast. Why did you choose the Gold Coast specifically?
I love the sun. I love the warmth. I can't stand the cold. That's why I left New Zealand. And property then, not so much now, but property then was still affordable in the Gold Coast. For me to buy a waterfront house in Sydney, I was looking at a minimum of 10, 15, $20 million, whereas I paid under 2 million for my property on the water in the Gold Coast. So it was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, you can't beat the beautiful sunny days where you're sort of looking out at the water and looking at swans and, you know, all sorts of
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
I mean, look, I don't think it's got this. I don't think it's the same today. I'm busy looking at houses now at $4 and $5 million, and I still get a lot of the Sydney stuff coming through on Instagram. And I'm looking at what my money buys me in Sydney, and I can arguably in certain areas get a better house.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's just become quite expensive here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In the last, well, that's all of us Sydney people coming up here, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, we've really pumped the market.
Yeah. And so what about the shore group specifically? So for the people that don't know, you're sort of North Gold Coast, so that's, the Runaway Bay, Sovereign Island, kind of area. So what sort of opportunity did you see there?
When you look at that central Gold Coast and south, it's very trendy. There's a lot of great restaurants there. It's quite a young demographic. But I look at it a little bit like the eastern suburbs. So in Sydney, everyone wants to work the eastern suburbs. They all want to work in Double Bay. They all want to sell the expensive property. That's that central and southern Gold Coast to me. Whereas the northern end, there wasn't a huge amount of talent. There was less people playing, less children playing in the sandpit up here, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I looked at it a little bit like low-hanging fruit, where there's just so much opportunity here. I've really tried to bring a lot of that Sydney mentality with me in the way that we run the business and present and all that sort of thing. And I felt that if I was going to bring that to the table, I was going to have less friction and competition in the northern end than I was central or south.
Yeah, interesting. And so I guess, so this is what I'm really keen to dig into with you here is that, you've had the big role in Sydney. You have been an agent yourself. You've recruited some of the best, like you've observed hundreds of top performing businesses, from like the inside. How
Yeah.
has that shaped your approach to, sort of going into business for yourself again and, thinking about how you're going to build Shaw Group?
I think it's definitely given me an unfair advantage.
Yeah. Yep.
Like you say, I have had the luxury of literally seeing the insides of hundreds of businesses, the good, the bad, the indifferent. So a lot of people have said, oh, you would have learned what not to do. It's like, well, I didn't really look at it like that. What I've done is I looked at what went really well for businesses, and I've tried to cherry pick and take the best and then put it into here. Those of you who know me know that I'm extremely impatient. So of course I got in here and tried to do it all within a week, and have learned pretty quickly that you just can't do that. I was for days and weeks on end. I felt like I was moving too slowly, and then I'd look around and people's heads are spinning because they're like, "You're doing a lot," like, you know what I mean. So I've had to sort of slow down and adapt and not be so aggressive in trying to change the business here. But I definitely feel like I've given the market here a good shake up. One of the things I did was straight away I plastered the team and or myself on the side of 6 buses that ran from, you know, Coolangatta to Coomera. So, our presence is very known. I really made a splash when I came back into agency. And when we look at, Monday, since I've taken over the business, 22 people have joined this business as of Monday, just gone. 16 of those are salespeople. Really, I've come in pretty hard and fast.
You're not here to punch spiders, in other words. I know there's a different expression for that, but, like, I'm keeping
That's
it
very PC of you,
I'm
Sam.
keeping it PG for YouTube, yeah. So let's talk about some of the things that, some of the best practices that you wanna keep and some of the pitfalls maybe that, that you're very wary of.
Yeah. So you touched on a couple of these things before. It's amazing to know that 70% of the properties that come to market don't go back to the person that was purchased from. Now, that's because as an industry, I believe we do a very poor job of customer service, especially once we've sold. We get in there, we go hard to list a property, we go hard to sell the property, and then we go again with something else. We don't look after the client on the way out. I've got an obsession with cars and motorbikes, right? So I buy these things a lot. The automotive industry does this so much better than us. You show up to buy your new car, there's a big sheet over it, a bow on it, they pull the sheet off, they make a big deal, they hand over gifts, they constantly get in touch with you and email you. Like, they're very, very good at the aftercare. We are not. So I put a person in here that basically takes that relationship from the time of settlement, rings them, make sure they fill out the surveys, etc., organizes them a gift, sends them anniversary letters, constantly is updating them with things like market updates and all that sort of thing to keep them sticky and keep them happy. So, I estimated that we were losing between $2 and $3 million a year by not having that person here. That was an important part for me. The community marketing and community relationships that you talked about. So I am very community focused. I think that, this business in particular that I purchased has been here 18 years. I have not seen that it's done a lot for the community. It's taken a lot, but I didn't see it doing a lot. I've got the same person, the customer service person, also looks after my community relations. Goes out, finds sponsorship deals. It could be charities, could be local schools, could be the surf lifesaving clubs, or whatever it might be. Negotiates the best exposure that we can possibly get out of that relationship, and then make sure that we are getting involved. We're actually doing more than what's expected of us. We're showing up. We're giving back to the community. And what that does is, I think it firms up our relationship with the community. It gives a better perception of us than maybe what we had before. But it's a real win-win for me. We're giving back to the community. They're financially benefiting, and in turn, they're supporting our business. So that's been an important step for us as well.
Yeah, so it's not just okay, here's your sponsorship money. I've checked that community box, done.
No.
It's a different approach.
Yeah, correct. And this was actually, I saw this working really well in a very large business in the North Shore of Auckland. I went over and spent some time with them last year. They were kind enough to sort of open their doors and show us how they did everything. And I very much modeled off that. That's an 18 office network. It's run really, really well, and it's worked well for them. So I just figured I haven't seen a business in Australia doing this. So I was really keen to sort of get cracking on it. And look, I think it's working well. It's early days for us, right? And I think that these are long-term investments that we're making. That role and both those capacities are a long-term investment. We might not see it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Who knows? But I think there's no reason that it won't be working.
Yeah, look, I mean, I lived in Runaway Bay for a little while when I first got here, and I actually sat watching the Runaway Bay footy team a few afternoons from the luxury of the clubhouse. Like, it was too cold to go outside. But I often sat there with Mark thinking, this would be a good place for, if you're a real estate agent, just to hang out here with the locals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I say. Like, it's not about just handing the money over. You've got to go and immerse yourself in that. You've got to be involved. You've got to have a passion for that. So don't go and sponsor something you've got no interest in, because you need to show up. You've got to be there and really be part of the community. It's not just about handing the check over. That's the easy part.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about bringing a bit of Sydney up to the Gold Coast. Like, I was delighted when they brought Harris Farm up here. Speaking of bringing a bit of Sydney up to the
How good
Gold
is Harris
Coast,
Farm?
how good is that? But in Sydney, you've got some true top performers, and I mean, look all around the country. And we talked about a few of them earlier. Josh Teslin, he keeps breaking commission barriers and things as well. And you mentioned to me a while ago that you really want to bring that Sydney spirit, if you like, up here. How are you planning on, sort of, well, I've always believed you can't beat if you can't see it. So how are you going to bring that, that fire up here to Shore Group?
A lot of it is just about sharpening up a little bit. As you would know, the Gold Coast is pretty relaxed. Everything moves a bit slower here, all that sort of thing. So a lot of it is just in how I am and how I act and the energy that I'm bringing to then get the energy within my team. So that's an important part. But sharpening up in everything, the way you dress, the car you drive, how you show up, the presentation that you deliver, how things are explained, auctions. Like, I've come into a business where they didn't do a lot of auctions, and I sit with them and they're like, oh no, the market doesn't like them. And I said, take me out there. So I go and sit in front of these vendors and I explain the process, I explain the upside, and all of a sudden they want to do auctions. Like, it's just there's a little bit of lack of energy and there's a little bit of lack of knowledge, I think. And so I'm trying to bring that in. But it very much does come down to the culture of the business as well, and that's that culture of high performance. But one thing that I learned working in that Sydney business, or just I guess just Ray White corporate to be fair, when they introduced Pulse, and for those of you that don't know, Pulse is an app that we have on our phones at Ray White, which is a dashboard for our business. We can see the different levels. An exciting part of Pulse is the leaderboards. Now, when those got launched, you had Josh Teslin, Vivian Yap, Gavin Rubinstein, these people, those three especially at the top, that, you know, Gav would write 3 million, and Josh might have been writing 2.5, and Vivian was whatever it was. Whoever would win that, let's say they topped out at 3 million, you knew that they was going to get better next year, because they were going to see and they'd go, oh wow, you can write that much, and it went 3, 4, 5, 6. Now they're writing $10 million. Now, I don't believe that any one of them would be writing those levels if it wasn't for the other, if that makes sense. They push each other through those leaderboards, and it's once they see that it can be done, they all want to do it. It's incredible.
I do remember, like I remember having this conversation with Gavin like a number of years ago, asking him why he stayed on at Ray White. And, he didn't actually say the leaderboard, but it was like, if you're going to play basketball, you want to play for the NBA or
Yeah,
something like that, where,
yeah,
like you've got some competition to spur you on.
yeah. It was just another lesson for me in self-limiting beliefs. I've got this thing about self-limiting belief where often until people have seen that it can be done, they can't do it, if that makes sense. And I tell this story about when I was younger, living in a house with a bunch of boys that rode motorbikes. And at that point, no one had backflipped a dirt bike, right? But they were all trying to do it, but it hadn't been done. And this would have gone on for at least a year, where they were trying to backflip these things into foam pits. One day one of them did it. The next day, all of them did it. And the bikes didn't change, the ramp didn't change, the environment didn't change. It was all the same, but someone pulled it off, and then they went, "Oh, you can do that," and so they all did it, and it's all here. It's incredible, and I think that's what the leaderboards do for us, and that's what I'm trying to inject into this business, is to show them what can be done. I had one of my sales guys, James Drake, over in WA a couple of weeks ago. I took him to Vivian just so that he could sit with her and see what she does and how she does it, and so that he could see what is possible. Because I think in the Gold Coast especially, we sit around and, yeah, there's a couple of top performers, don't get me wrong, but when they see these people working at this level, it just gives them a bit more energy, and they can see that, it is just a mind game. It's all a mental game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you clearly have recruitment on your mind. So since
Mm,
coming up here and getting on the buses and taking over the joint, you have brought on 22 people or something or other.
yes, yeah.
What is the goal, at least for the next 12 months?
Well, look, I said I was going to double this business in 12 months. I'm 4 months in, and I'm not on track to doubling it, because it's interesting once you get in here and actually sitting at this desk and seeing everything. There was probably a few more holes that I needed to plug than I knew about, and unfortunately, not everyone is wanting to move at the speed that I am. I'm a non-selling principal, so I am relying on the team to deliver on these things. And so it just takes time for these people to get up and running. This business will be a $40 million business. And to do that, I need to get about 100 people, I think. The balancing act is managing cash flow while growing,
Yeah.
which is a daily challenge. I've invested heavily in younger people that are new to industry, because for years and years and years, I said if I ever had a business, I would just bring a new to industry. I want to maintain a really good culture of the business. And when you bring experienced people in, you do run the risk of disrupting that. However, if you bring these people up and through, then you grow the caliber of person that you want in your business. I'm far from having it perfect, but I'm working at it every day.
I don't think any of us are perfect at it, but all you can do is work at it. And I guess look, I heard the expression recruitment funnel a little while ago, sort of thinking about bringing your next person on like one at a time. It's sort of like you're not planning ahead. Actually, it was from somebody else in the Ray White group, but have your number and you've got to go for it, which you've sort of said your number. When it comes to recruiting people, you're going to, like, people are obviously going to approach you and they're going to be either experienced, they're going to be somewhere in the middle. or they're probably going to be young people with stars in their eyes. How will you think about supporting agents at all stages of their career phases?
For me, it's about having a strong leadership team in here, which is something that I've had to build. So I've got someone that's specifically looking after my people that have been in the business 3 years or under, because they need a lot of skills training. I'm very much looking after the balance of that. It's about having a bespoke approach. So much like when I was CEO of Ray White New South Wales ATT, where I knew that every business owner was different, every marketplace was different, their ambition was different, and they needed different things from me. I mentioned partnership plans earlier. Partnership plans were where I brought principals in one by one. I sat them down at our board table in corporate with my whole team, and I said, "Where are you going? How do we help you get there?" And for the first time in 120 years or whatever it was, we'd actually asked our franchisees what they wanted rather than telling them. And that just changed the game for us, because I say to people, like the franchise offering at Ray White is so wide that often for our franchisees, it's like drinking from the fire hose, right? It's just too much. So I looked at the franchise offering as a bit of a smorgasbord. We are going to pick and choose what we wanted, and we are going to give them lots of that. So once we found out what was important to them, we could then deliver them value. So no different from me in here. Each individual needs an individual plan. They need to be treated differently. They need to be supported in different ways. And I can deliver on some of that. I can't always deliver on all of it. When you get to that level of people, I do need to continue to build my leadership team out so that I can continue to add that value. But we have got the makings of it already started. And, every person in this business has a business plan. It's a very bespoke approach to each individual. I've got people in here that only want to write 200 or 300. That's fine. I will support that. I've got people in here that want to write 2 and 3 million. I will support that, but it looks different for all of them.
Yeah, depending on, where they are in their lives and all of that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so I have to ask you, like, as somebody who sort of manages a newsroom in this industry, when you see the releases like Vivian Yap joins Ray White, Josh Teslin joins Ray White, and you're sort of looking at the guy in the chair going, wow, that Andrew McCulloch, he is good. How did you get him?
I cannot take credit 100% for any of those people. That was a massive team effort. Yes, often I was out there making the phone calls. Not for, I didn't even establish the initial relationship with some of those people. I was heavily involved in all of them, and more heavy in some than others. So, but I was prepared to ring people that no one else would. And also, I think I had an early start on recruitment of experienced people. The reality is, in the early days, what I'd do is I'd go to Eric and I'd look at the stage, and then I'd just try and pull one off the stage. Right?
Yep.
That was my prospecting pipeline, was who's speaking at Eric this year.
Just hanging a couple of feet behind Tom Panos, like, doing his
Yeah. So, when I recruited John McManus, I spotted him on the stage. When I recruited Vivian Yap, spotted her on the stage. But it was all done through creating relationships, and it's all by, you got to pick up that phone, you got to make that phone call, you got to get in front of that person. You don't sell to them, you build a relationship. You don't focus on them joining the business, you focus on building a good relationship with them. To the level where, like, I met up with Vivian and her family in Bali on their family holiday. I went to family dinners. I genuinely cared about these people, and I knew that if I focused on the relationship, that the rest would just work. And each one's got its own individual story. My recruitment of John McManus was very different to the recruitment of Vivian Yap, and then our involvement with Josh Teslin. People say, how did Josh come on board? Well, Josh could have gone anywhere he wanted. We had a relationship with him through high-performing breakfasts that we were putting on. And when he made the move out of the independent that he was with, obviously we were on the shopping list. So that's first step. We already had the relationship with him. But from there on in, we just moved faster than everyone else. We started onboarding Josh the minute he made a phone call to tell us he was available. So he hadn't even said yes, and we were already onboarding the bloke,
Yeah.
And before you know it, Josh was just like, "Oh, I'm at Ray White now." You know what I mean? Like, it was, I don't know. I mean, he could probably answer that question better than I can, but nothing was done without a strong relationship. And that, for Josh in particular, the relationship was with Tim Snell and myself. Pete Diamantidis was the same. Vivian, I had a really strong relationship with her, but I had also bonded her quite closely with the CEO in WA. John McManus and I got along really well, so relationship is key, and you've got to focus on that. Don't Don't try and recruitment's a dirty word. You know what I mean? Like, never try to recruit someone. Build a relationship with them, and the rest will pan out.
Well, what you've just described there is no different to any other sales process, like even listing a property or listing a management or something like that. I think it's all like it all just ties, no matter how much you want to silver bullet, it all ties back to the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that yeah, that relationship piece is just so key. You know, you've got to focus on that. Without that, you've got nothing. Yes, they've then got to like the offering, they've got to like the brand, etc., etc., etc. But if you don't have the relationship, forget it. Um,
Yeah.
but I never understood. You know, like I've had franchisees that would say, "Oh, I can't recruit." I'd say, "Can you list a house?" Of course I can. It's the same. It's a person instead of a property.
Yeah, except you're putting your own brand out there and becoming an attraction brand as a leader. There's a perception that sometimes I think that changing agencies means taking a step backwards, but like we can see that guys like Josh have busted that myth. Can you talk about the fear of change and how you think agents should approach different career decisions at different points?
I think if you make a poor decision, it's definitely going to go backwards. You know, that's why you need to be so careful about where you go and how you move. But for us, we always tried to make it as friction free as possible. And a lot of that was done through the planning and onboarding of those people, you know, making sure that it was as seamless as possible. When you're making the move to a better group or a better business or something that's going to support you more, there's absolutely no reason for you to go backwards at all. There's this huge fear, as you alluded to, in people's mind around change and, oh, but if I move now, you know, what's going to happen? And all my clients won't want to deal with me anymore because I'm not part of XYZ brand, or I'm going to have to restart and set up. I'm going to lose all my data off REA, and everyone's going to. The reality is, none of that matters. Like if you're moving for the right reasons to the right place, everything will work out. But it's got to be calculated risk. It's got to be planned. You've got to, when Vivian came on, she wanted me to plan out what the 3 months were going to look like every day. I had to actually show her, okay, each day this is what we're going to do, to give her some comfort around it. I cannot give you an example of someone that's joined me in some way, shape, or form and it's gone backwards. I can't think of one. They've all hit the accelerator hard, and it's worked for them. But there is this huge fear. I get people saying to me, "Oh, but I'm just going to wait until I get that commission." No, don't do that. Like, you've already made the decision to move. So between now and the time that you move, all you're doing is building a competitor's brand. There is never a good time to move. You will always leave money on the table. You've just got to get your head around that and focus on the future, because when done right, Josh is a great example. I think he was a $2 million writer thereabouts when he came on board. He'll write 10 now.
Yep.
Now, that's not because of Ray White in its entirety. That's not the only reason, but there's lots of things that have helped Josh do that, and let him focus on dollar productive activity. He leaned very hard on the franchise model and has taken full advantage of what's there, as he should. And as a result, he's been able to just go and list and sell hard, and it's been a really good move for him.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal to watch. Absolutely. There are so many models though out there at the moment. I mean, Ray White is your traditional franchise model with some sort of options and things like that. But like there's never been a time I think in history where we've seen, this hybrid model and this your own brand model and this like all of these different things, and some crazy commission splits that we're seeing around
Yeah,
at the moment.
yeah.
Um, what do you think of that? Like, what do you see as the relationship between commission structures and agent performance, from your perspective as a business owner?
Yeah, well, I guess just to make one thing, just to point out the obvious, I've gone into my own business and I've stuck with the traditional franchise model and I've stuck with Ray White, and I've done that for a reason because I've seen it all, right? And I think that as salespeople, we can get very caught up in percentage splits and all that sort of thing. The reality is, there's a few things. I learned a lesson early in my sales career. I would have been maybe 20, and I was actually with Ray White. I was on a 60% split at the time. An independent came to me and offered me 90% with no franchise fee. And they said, come on board with us. Here's a check, big number on it. You can have that. And that 90%. And I went, this is going to be great. I was writing big numbers. I made the move. I stayed there for a year. That year, on that 90% with no franchise fee, I made less money than I'd ever made before in my life. And it was because I didn't have all of the bells and the whistles and all the stuff that I thought I didn't need. I was at that point, Ego would have been out of control. I was bigger than the brand. I knew what I was doing. It was all me. I was the rock star. I learned very quickly that all of that was not true. And that, that there is value in that. And I do now value leadership. I do now value products and tools and, all the things that are able for me to concentrate on dollar productive activity as well. I think as an industry, we undervalue things like that. And, you really need to look at the true offering. There's models out there where they go, I've heard salespeople come to me and say, oh, if I join this brand, they'll pay me 90%. And I go, okay, so you're only handing over 10%. And they go, yeah, that's great. And I said, that's an expensive franchise fee. Like they don't look at it. They don't, in my mind, they're not looking at it properly. I'm not here to tell you that this is the best and only model. However, it works well for me. I see value in it, and that's why I've stuck with it. I also look at where are the most successful people. You quoted Gavin Rubinstein earlier. Well, this is the model of where the majority of the successful people sit in within the industry. But everyone's got a different style of business that they want to run, and they mix their lifestyle and their work life. And so I'm not here preaching that this is the only way, like I say, but it depends what you want out of what you want out of your career and what you want your business to look like and what your expectations are. You'll never hear me whinge about my franchise fee because I get my money's worth.
Yeah.
If I need help, I'm on the phone to the CEO. If property management looks a bit shaky, I'm ringing my BDM and saying, hey, corporate, I need some help here. And they'll drop everything and come and do it. Now, the value that's attached to that for me personally is massive. Business ownership's a very lonely place, and I don't feel alone here.
Yeah, like what it's true, like some people will buy all the courses that, Facebook sends them, and then they don't work because they don't finish it. Or like,
Correct.
it's
Yeah.
like, you've got to take advantage of the things around you.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's people have got this vision or this view, sorry, on cost. Whether they're a salesperson and saying, well, I'm only on 60%, so you're costing me that 40, or if you're in a franchise, the franchise fees are costing me X. Stop looking at cost. The cost is irrelevant. Look at value. What value am I getting out of that? I've seen people go, oh, I only pay 3% because they're part of, that's the way their group works. And I go, cool, what do you get for that? Oh, well, nothing. Well, that's an expensive thing. I'd rather spend 8% and get all of the stuff and grow my business with it. I'm not interested in cost, but I'm very interested in value.
I think you've sort of touched on a very important point there too, and that is, it's actually up to you to get the value. Some
Yeah.
people just expect the value to, magically come to them. Whereas, if you don't know what's on offer, then, how do you know what to go to the buffet and look for?
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're showing up with a blindfold on, what are you going to eat? You know what I mean?
It could be.
But look, I'm not afraid to ask either. Like I pay a lot of money in franchise fees, so I'm not shy in saying, well, I'll pay you whatever you want, but I want my money's worth. And I'll be very demanding, and I don't feel bad about it at all. I don't blame the franchise for any of my problems. If I'm going to take the credit for my success, then I need to also wear the blame for any loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think we're sort of basically talking some personal accountability in there, which I think is relevant to anyone in any business actually. So,
Yeah, yeah. I am where I deserve to be at any point in my life, whether that's in my career, my personal life, my fitness, whatever it is. I'm getting out what I'm putting in. If I'm not happy with what I see when I look in the mirror, I know I haven't worked hard enough, and that's on me.
yeah, absolutely. Let's talk trends briefly. So there's a lot going on in the real estate industry, prop tech wise and innovation wise and all that sort of thing. What are the big trends that you see, that you're keeping an eye on, that you would like Shaw Group to capitalize on in the next couple of years?
AI. AI
Glad to hear it.
is AI is just incredible. And if you're not bringing AI into your business, you've got your head in the sand, and you are going to get left behind. I think that people started to think that AI was this thing that was going to come and go. Like, it's the future. That is, and if you're not getting involved now, you're in for a shock, because I've never seen something move so quickly. That the stuff that they're doing in AI now, like, I'm obsessed with AI and I can't keep up with it. Like,
Mm.
every day something else is coming out and you're being able to use it in a different way. And I was at dinner last night with a guy who owns a big chain of childcare centres, and we were just talking about AI. I think we talked about AI most of the dinner, actually. and just we're talking about how we were using it in our businesses and what it was doing and where it was going. And it's just so incredible the amount of work that you can fit in now using it, the level that comes out, the quality of your work that's coming out of it now. Like Seth Watts said to me, Andrew, if you need to think about it, it should be going through AI. Basically stop using your brain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are going to go, oh, that's dangerous and all that sort of thing. I get that, but this is the conversation we had last night. If we use AI, we can concentrate purely on interacting with other human beings only. Like imagine that. Imagine if we just spent all of our time building relationships and AI looked after everything else. How great would our business be? How much better would our businesses be where we don't have to worry about all that other stuff? And all we've got to do is build relationships.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
Yeah, 100%. So what are some of the things you're experimenting with?
So we've had a bit of a play with the sort of the automatic responses where they come and start to ask questions and AI is responding to that. That was a bit hit and miss. Feel it was a bit early for that. We're currently got an app in build where it's going to be mainly an administrative support. So if you're a salesperson and you need a Form 6, you just ask it, it spits it straight out. You want a contract on a property, ask it, it'll spit it straight out. So what that does, like speed to salesperson is literally seconds.
Yeah.
It's going to take strain off my administrative team. It's going to eliminate human error. So it's the upside is huge. And when you look at the cost of this, yeah, okay, it's a 6-figure bill, right? I get that, but an administrator now is 70 grand, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm in a growing business. Every fifth person I put on, I need to put another admin person on. Right, so that's 70 grand a pop, so 20 people for it, you know what I mean? The cost just, you're another 240 grand before you know it. Whereas this app will just take care of all of that. So, that's going to be a real win for our business, I think. But when you look at what AI is doing in putting together presentations or, just writing ads, like communications to your vendors, like it's just endless,
Yeah.
the opportunity with AI within our industry. My advice is like start playing with it, start having a play around with it, get to know it, understand it. One of the things that Seth Watts taught me from Campaign Agent, he said, get the paid version of everything. It's cheap and it's way better.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Apart from the new version of ChatGPT, which is $200 a month, and I
Is
feel
it
like,
really?
yeah, which I really feel like I want someone to do something about the exchange rate, but
Yeah.
I don't want to end up down the rabbit hole. All right, I'm going to be slightly cheeky now, but if let's just say an agent listening to this would be considering making a change in their career, what would you want them to know about Ray White Shaw Group that we haven't covered?
That's a great question. I mean, look, we've spoken a lot about culture, we've spoken a lot about the technology and where we're going, we've spoken about the growth. I think whenever anyone is considering a move, they need to, over and above like location and style of property, commission splits, anything like that, the number one thing that you should be considering is pick the right leader. So, I don't know if this is going to directly answer your question, but the people that come and work for me want to work for me, if that makes sense. They want, I'm a little bit different to a lot of other principals, right? Like my background's a little bit different, the way I lead, it's a little bit different. That they're not, that whole bespoke thing is different. So you've really got to look at, is that the leader that I want? Not, is that the group, or is that the brand, or is that the market, or is that the style of home? Is that the leader that I want? Because that's so important in your success or failure. I believe that I create an environment where people are able to succeed. I create an environment where people are able to concentrate on dollar productive activity. It's high pace in here, but it's high performing. We have fun, but we get the business done first. We're professional, but we have a play with it at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I give people the ability to build their own personal brand as long as they don't mess with mine or the Ray White brand. I believe in consistency in the way that we present property for sale, but I also want to give people the flexibility to be bespoke in the way that they are seen or perceived in the marketplace. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just around that leadership piece, of which I have such a strong belief in. It's probably just coming out of that Ray White corporate environment where the whites are so big on leadership and creating good leaders and That's one of the big parts and values of being part of Ray White, is the leadership that's provided, and I want that to be a big part of my business as well.
Yeah, yeah, they do have amazing sort of leadership pathways and things like that. I've tried to map them a couple of times myself, and even applied for a job once. No, I'm just kidding. Thought about it. But anyway, um, Andrew, it's been amazing catching up with you. I'm so pleased to have, like well, I was going to say fellow Sydney sider on the Gold Coast, but it's great to have you up here. I always ask my guests this one last question, which is, if there's one thing that you'd like people to remember from this conversation, what would it be?
It would really be that piece around leadership. If you are a leader, make sure you're a good leader. Concentrate on looking after your people, look after your community. If you are a salesperson, make sure you had good leadership. Demand that from the business that you're in. It's so important. I think leadership is key in this business, and it's what creates these monster businesses that we have. You look behind any of them, they've all got fantastic leadership. So I think it'd be that for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Andrew McCulloch, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam.